This is an honor for me to introduce a hero of mine. I mean, she was the youngest woman in Congress at a time when Congress dealt with things differently. They actually impeached the president as opposed to trying to, after the fact, make legally illegal things that they did. And we know her history. We know that she's been an elected official as a district attorney. She was the controller of the city of New York, a Congress member, an author, a practicing attorney, but most importantly, at a time in our history where we're looking for people with expertise and we're looking for people with courage to do what has to be done, here's someone who's led the way for us, Elizabeth Holtzman.
Thanks very much. I just heard the last few words of John Nierenberg, and I don't know that anybody can add very much to what he said, or add very much to the eloquence of his walking. What does it tell us? That it is such a struggle to get our government to do what's right and to pay attention to what the people of the United States want. Well, no one ever said that liberty was easy, and no one ever said that preserving our democracy was going to be easy. I happen to have been elected to Congress and was put on the House Judiciary Committee against my will, because who knew that a president of the United States was going to be impeached? But I was there during the impeachment of Richard Nixon, and the Congress did the right thing because the American people wanted it. Congress didn't want to impeach Richard Nixon. When John Dean testified that he told the president there was a cancer on the White House and the presidency, that people were selling presidential pardons and offering bribes to the burglars to keep them quiet. And he said, and the president said, well, I know where we need money, I know where we can get it. And nobody said the word impeachment. But when Richard Nixon fired Archibald Cox, a special prosecutor, in something called the Saturday Night Massacre, there are only a few of us in this room that are old enough to remember that, the American people said, you know, we are not a banana republic. The President of the United States can't fire the prosecutor who's looking into him. We are going to stand up for the rule of law, and you, Congress, you may not have ever heard the word impeachment, but you're going to have to act. And Congress did. Didn't want to, but was forced into it by the American people. And when we actually started that job, we realized that we had to do it the right way, because the stakes were so high, because we realized that it wasn't just a break-in, it was a break-in to obstruct an election. It wasn't just a cover-up, it was a cover-up to pervert the electoral process. It wasn't just an ordinary burglary, an ordinary cover-up. They used the FBI, they used the CIA, they used the instrumentalities of our government, supposed to do governmental business, to obstruct an election. That's what it was about. And it wasn't only that. We had a president who wanted to have the people who opposed the Vietnam War audited, his had enemies list, going to harass them with IRS audits. He had illegal wiretaps of journalists and White House staffers. So this was serious. We understood that this was a president who saw himself as above the law. And there was one remedy in the Constitution. And all of us had to go back and pull out those old dusty tomes. What does the impeachment clause of the Constitution mean? We never studied it in law school. Believe me, never studied it. But the fact of the matter is the Founding Fathers were very wise people. They understood that too much power would threaten a democracy. They studied history. They knew what people did. And so they very carefully created a system of checks and balances. And then when they got finished with it, it's like God overseeing the sixth day. They couldn't rest. They said, you know, we left something out here. Because what happens if the president in the 4 years of his office, because they created a 4-year term, a limited term, this wasn't a lifetime term, this wasn't a monarchy. What happens if the president during those 4 years uses his power to subvert the Constitution? What remedy is there? They said, this is a serious problem. They recognized that. And so they provided the power of impeachment. This was a power to preserve our democracy. And they put it there because they said, in the languages, they knew that there was a president who might commit treason, might commit bribery, or might commit high crimes and misdemeanors. High crimes and misdemeanors is a fancy term for what the representative from Virginia said he wanted to deal with, which was great and dangerous offenses that subvert the Constitution. That was it. Not someone who didn't pay his taxes or didn't pay the parking tickets, but someone who was going to commit a great and dangerous offense that subverted the Constitution. That was the heart of it. And they put the power of impeachment not in the Supreme Court, unelected, not in the states, but in the House of Representatives to start the whole process, because that was closest to the people. So let me say something. The framers of the Constitution understood that someday there would be a Richard M. Nixon who had to be removed from office, and he was. And they understood that there would be a George W. Bush who would have to be removed from office. And the question is, will he be?
Yes.
That is up to us. Not just in this room, but all over this United States. Everybody has to contact their representatives, their senators, mostly their representatives. Work in your own districts. Get your congressmen and women to understand that the people of this country want the rule of law. This problem is not solved by the next election. Because what is the message? It's like saying, you know what? This murderer, he's going to die. Why do we have to go to the trouble of bringing him to justice? This rapist is going to die. They're going to be out of office. Someday these people won't be around. Why bother now? Why bother? Too much trouble. Wait a minute. We act because now there's justice and a message to the next president. We don't know who that's going to be. And the reason I raised the Nixon impeachment is because so much of it is relevant. And by the way, Mr. Cheney, he was educated in that White House, and Mr. Ford's White House, and wants to undo what we did during Watergate to correct a president who put himself above the rule of law. Now, what are the grounds for impeachment, and why are these great and dangerous offenses? It's not that we just don't like his policies. I mean, many of us in this room abhor his policies. But that's not what impeachment is about. It's something that undermines the Constitution. Well, let's look at what the Constitution says the president is required to do. He doesn't have too many jobs, you know? It's a pretty small article, Article 2. Congress has a lot more powers, believe me. The president has really 3 jobs. He gets to greet the ambassadors. From that, he's got control of all of foreign policy. He gets to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. He gets to be commander-in-chief. Those are his constitutional responsibilities, 3 of them. And then he takes an oath. I swear, I'm going to uphold the Constitution. Well, what does it mean to take care that the laws are faithfully executed? We learned this in the 4th grade. Congress passes the laws, the president carries them out. Then the Supreme Court decides if the president did it the right way or if Congress wrote a law that's constitutional. But that's the story. Very simple. It's not just that President Bush is spying on us. It's that the law said he couldn't do it. We passed a law, and I was in Congress at that time, in response to Richard Nixon's illegal wiretap. And in response to the CIA and FBI illegal surveillance of people primarily who were opposed to the war, Congress said never again. President, and by the way, Nixon said the wiretaps were for national security. Nonsense. So we've been through this. We've heard this all before. This whole story is just like recycled. And it's not because they're so ecologically minded. Sure. But Congress said, you know, we've seen this, never again. No president, for national security purposes, even national security purposes, can ever wiretap without getting court approval, because they knew what a president on his own would do. They saw it with Nixon. They said, this is political. We don't want this. And they said, even in a war, just imagine, even if the United States is in a war, the president's got 15 days where he can wiretap without a court order. 15 days. After 15 days in a war, he's got to come back to Congress and get approval. So Congress was very clear. President, this is the law. You want a wiretap? You got to go to the special court and get approval. You don't even need approval beforehand. If it's such an emergency, go wiretap and then go to the court. And if they say yes, you can go forward. Now, this court is not exactly the world's hardest court to get a wiretap approval from. From 1978 to like now, they've issued about 19,000 approvals and 5 rejections. It's not hard. Not hard, but the fact that they're independent does create a little barrier. You can't wiretap the Washington Post reporter. You can't wiretap John Nierenberg. Got to show there's some reason, okay? Very big interference. President Bush said, I am commander-in-chief. I don't have to obey this law. Well, we have been there. And if we have someone say as president, I'm commander-in-chief, and I don't have to obey the law, we are right down the road to military tyranny. And by the way, one of the articles, one of the grounds for the impeachment of Richard Nixon is the president, this is history, was that he illegally wiretapped.
Yeah, right.
Because he put himself above the law. That's there, that's a precedent. But if you don't agree with the words of the Constitution, and you don't agree with the precedent set by Congress in the Nixon impeachment process, then the Supreme Court has said, as president, you're not above the law. Then we had the same situation in wartime. Harry Truman was the president, and we were in the Korean War. And all of a sudden, the steelworkers went on strike. They said they wanted, I forget what the reason was, but they were on strike. And Truman said, this is a problem. How are we going to get the steel for the bullets and the guns and the tanks and the planes and all the rest of the munitions that we need to conduct the Korean War? Guess what? I'm commander-in-chief. I'm taking over the steel mills. The Supreme Court said, You are commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy. You are not commander-in-chief of the country. Big difference.
Yeah, that's right.
And they said, no, you can't do it. So if they can say, no, you can't, by virtue of being commander-in-chief, seize the steel mills during the Korean War, what right does he have during the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan, whatever war he wants to call it? What right does he have to wiretap against the specific prohibitions of a law that Congress passed? He doesn't. The Supreme Court in this case, and I'm just citing it because it's a very important case. The main opinion in that case the most famous opinion, was written by a man called Justice Jackson. He was the reason he was so famous was he was the chief prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials for the United States. And he wrote in his opinion that and he saw, right in the back of his head as he was writing this opinion and looking at Truman, he was seeing what he had just seen in Europe. Dictatorship, destruction, military tyranny. He said, not in America. This will take us down that road, and we don't want to go there. That's the precedent. What are we going to do? Junk it? The President of the United States says, well, Geneva Conventions, or his top legal counsel, Mr. Gonzalez, very genius, said it's obsolete. The Geneva Conventions. The Constitution, that's the Geneva Conventions in 1949. Constitution is 200 years older than that. Wait a minute. Obsolete. All these restrictions on a president. Obsolete. We're past that. We're in the 21st century. We're speeding into the 25th century. We don't need all this hindrance of a constitution, of the rule of law. Commander-in-Chief, he should be able to do anything to protect the people of the United States, no matter what. Well, friends, there's precedent for removing a president from office, for putting himself above the rule of law, and we had it specifically with regard to Nixon on wiretapping, and we have specifically the same thing with regard to Bush on wiretapping. Nothing has changed. So the grounds are there. And this president has put himself above the law with regard to torture. We have laws in the United States. This is not just we don't like torture. Nobody in this room, I think, likes torture. But, friends, there's a law that says you can't do it. They changed one of those laws. But the law was so tough, they carried the death penalty to torture. There's something called the anti-torture, doesn't even have a name, but it prohibits torture by anybody outside the United States. And if somebody dies during this torture, it's a death penalty. It's a U.S. crime, not a Iraqi crime, or a Russian crime, or a Kenyanese crime. It's a U.S. crime that carries a death penalty. The president says, obsolete. What's that have to do with me? I'm commander-in-chief. I can order whatever I want. That's the country we're in. Forget about just that there's torture the next time. The torture won't be in Iraq. It could be here. Whoever's going to be arrested won't be in Iraq or Afghanistan. They'll be here. It'll be us. Any one of us. If a president has absolute power in the time of war as commander-in-chief, then we are lost. That's not what the Supreme Court said about a president's power in time of war. That's not what the framers ever had in mind during a time of war. And that's certainly not what we did when we voted for the impeachment of Richard Nixon during the only impeachment process that's withstood the test of historical scrutiny. The third ground I want to mention in terms of dangerous offenses that subvert the Constitution. So the main ground is, he says, I'm above the law. I don't have to obey the law. That's a subversion of the Constitution, subversion of his oath of office. But then he starts a war in Iraq, and he tells the American people they're weapons of mass destruction, mushroom cloud, imminent cloud, and very big cloud. And everyone is saying cloud. Condoleezza Rice says cloud, and Cheney says cloud, and Rumsfeld, they all got this word down pat. And then they say, oh, and Saddam Hussein is in cahoots with Al-Qaeda. So this is really serious. We're going to go after Saddam Hussein. Well, the framers were also very smart about the war powers. They didn't give them to the president. They kind of split them up. And they split them up because they were great students of history, they said. And you could read Madison's letters, you could read any one of the framers and what they say about the powers of the executive. And one of the things they say is executives love to get people into unnecessary wars. We know this from history. They said, 200 years ago they said this, not yesterday, 200 years ago they knew. They just were students of history, they understood that. So they put a lot of checks on the president's war-making power. First of all, the president's got one power, he's commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy. But Congress is given the power, guess what, to declare war. You think it's the only power? Congress is given the power to make rules with respect to the conduct of war. Congress is given power to raise and support armies. Congress is given power to raise and support navies. And Congress is given the power to do whatever is necessary and proper to carry out all these aforementioned powers. That's huge. Why did Congress get these powers? Because the framers were afraid of centralizing the war-making power in the hands of the president. So when a president goes to Congress, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have been smart, but when a president goes to Congress and the American people and says, we are in danger, imminent danger, we have to protect ourselves, we were attacked, these are the people who attacked us, and we're going to get them. If he lies, he undoes this constitutional framework where Congress and the American people are supposed to participate in the decision because it involves human lives, our lives, the enemy's lives, and a huge amount of money. The framers understood this, so they didn't want one person making this decision. It wasn't just two heads are better than one. It's just that they knew that executives love to take people into war, and they knew that Congress, which had to respond to the people, why we're spending all this money, why people dying, might be a little bit more reluctant. So giving Congress the power was a deliberate break on the war-making effort. So when the President of the United States drives this country into war on a basis of lies and misstatements and exaggerations and deceptions, and I could go on that list, he's subverting the Constitution. He's subverting the basic scheme of our government. So that's another ground for impeachment. We can find a few more, for sure, I'm just outlining the basics here. But all I'm saying to you is if we allow this to go unpunished, if we just turn away from this and say, well, can't be bothered, too much trouble, there's no time, every argument, what is going, not only will we have condoned what he did, and the assault and devastation of our democracy that's taken place, but we are just setting the foundation for what's going to happen in the future and how much worse it can be even then. So that's why I want to say thank you for being here tonight. It's rainy outside, it's a horrible evening, but here you are because what you care about is not just yourselves, although you're allowed to, but about this country and about the future of this country and the future indeed of the world. And there's nothing, I think, that's more important now than trying to make this Congress realize that it has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution. Right. That it is responsible for preserving this democracy. And that it can't shirk its task. And it doesn't have to worry about a presidential veto. And it doesn't have to worry about Republican votes. When we started the impeachment process with Richard Nixon, there wasn't one poll that was taken. No one did any head counts. But we did it the right way, and we had the evidence, and in the end, the American people said, this is fair and just and right and necessary. Remember, unlike George Bush, Richard Nixon was elected, he was impeached in July '74. He was elected a year and a half earlier, in November '72, with one of the largest landslides in American history. And the American people turned around because they saw what he did to the Constitution. The American people know what this man has done to the Constitution, and they are ready. say thank you, to urge you to do more. Join Mr. Nierenberg and his walk. More important, contact your representatives, get your friends together, sign petitions, stand on street corners. Wake up, Washington, give them that wake-up call, because this is a wake-up call for democracy. Every one of us has to be like Paul Revere. This is amazing that people aren't paying attention. We have a CIA that's destroying evidence. We had 18.5 minutes. This is hours, months of tapes. What's going on? Friends, this is really a dangerous time for our country. And so, but we can do something about it. It's still a democracy. And don't wait until next November. This is not an issue that's decided by an election. This is an issue that's decided by the Congress doing its job, which the framers in the end trusted it to do. And they trusted us to light a little fire under them, or if necessary, a bonfire under them, and just get them to do what's right. I just want to say thank you again for including me in this program, and good luck to you, John, and good luck to everybody in this room, and good luck to you. Thank you. I wrote a book called The Impeachment of George W. Bush. The title says it all.